Good morning, everyone. I'm Griff Jones. I'm the head of service from Leicestershire, and I've recently taken over the chair of the adult audits group. We carry out regular audits, multi-agency audits through the year, and the last audit that we carried out in April focused on how we were working to the thresholds. Now, just at the offset to say that in adults, we are having some discussions around the use of the word thresholds, and I think we may be looking to move those into sort of the idea of calling them decision-making tools, but basically the principle will still remain the same. So we were looking at those, and one of the learning that came out from that was around question 2. So one of the questions we wanted to ask, very much part of making safeguarding personal, was how, at the point of view of a referral coming in, how were we looking at to understand the views of the person at that stage of the process when we were looking at it, because obviously that's key in terms of how we then progress work going forward. And generally what the finding with the audit was is that the decision making at this point was consistent to what we would want it to be. Staff valued the tools that were in place and are in place at the moment to help them to do that. But one case did highlight the idea that actually sometimes there's been quite a delay in terms of when the referral comes in, when we consider that referral and understanding the person's views and wishes in relation to the issues that have been raised. And some of that has been about the fact that the adult social care worker has been unable to talk to the person at the time to understand what their wishes and views are. That may be, in the case we were looking at, it may be that somebody was at the time in A&E receiving treatment. It may also have been in other areas where adult social care may not have easy access. And so what we did agree as a group was that any person at that time could be asking what their views are at the time around their safeguarding referral. Next slide, please. So yeah, that's what I was saying. So that any person who's working or in contact with that person, if they were aware that there was a safeguarding referral, that we were hearing the views of the wishes of the person at the time, it is not the responsibility solely of the adult social care worker. So what we're looking to do as part of the audit is to promote that, and that's why I'm very grateful that I've been able to come here to sort of highlight that to everyone. And what we're saying is that it's then about how that agency then relays that views to the adult social care worker who's considering the thresholds decision-making process in terms of what we then do going forward in safeguarding. So that was short and sweet, and obviously, happy to take questions as we go forward. Thank you, Helen.
Thanks, Griff. That's a really important message, that we keep the person right at the centre of everything that that we are doing. It's important to really understand that person's not only their wishes and feelings, but their lived experience, and that's is vital. And we hear that in our work with children and young people as well. Thank you. So moving on, our next slide. Aha, this is where I'm going to attempt to use a poll. So, hope I've got this right, Liz. So I'm going to go to polls. You set this up yesterday, and I'm going to launch this poll. And hopefully, is it coming up in the chat?
Fine.
Is it coming up?
Yes. It's all right.
Yes, it's coming
up.
Yeah.
Hey, so have you heard of the term cuckooing? And you need to answer either yes or no.
Can you see the results, or do you want us to read them out?
No, I can see the results. Oh, brilliant. That's good. Yeah, 85%, 84%. Oh, just wanted to just mention now that we've got 377 people in the meeting. Isn't that fantastic?
Amazing.
Amazing. Yeah.
Some people are saying yes in the chat as well, so probably not on the poll, but they're agreeing. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Right. I'm just going to close that. Okay. So cuckooing. So I've got another
Tuesday. Case.
Oh, hello.
Doing one-to-ones.
Yeah, somebody mute themselves because we're hearing about their one-to-ones. Okay, the next question is and close that poll and go back to, you see, this is next question. Okay, launch. So this is a word cloud thing. Okay, so what do you think it is? So just odd words or phrases, if you could give us some idea of what you actually think it is. Yeah. Some befriending, hijacking, manipulation. Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah. Gosh, exploitation's the biggie. Yeah. Yeah. Drugs, criminal, taking over somebody's house. Often homes of vulnerable people. Yeah, it could be 154 responses here. Oh, this is great. Oh, I'm liking this. Yeah. Yeah, the word vulnerable is coming up an awful lot. Vulnerable person. Yeah. That's great. Thank you. Right, so moving on. Yeah. So this is like, I wanted to highlight the guidance that we have in the Safeguarding Adults procedures, guidance for working with adults at risk of exploitation and cuckooing. And the reason I'm reminding people about this, twofold really, is that again, it came out of an audit that people didn't realise that we actually had a cuckooing process, cuckooing guidance, and we have meetings, multi-agency planning meetings to look at this area of risk. So this is a reminder that we have them. But also, for those people that work with children and young people, you might also want to look at our guidance as well, because it is quite detailed and quite helpful. And as people have said, so cuckooing is a practice where people take over a person's home and use the property to facilitate exploitation. And it takes the name from cuckoos who take over the nests of other people. Gosh. Yeah, well, it does take over the nests of other people, but I mean the nests of other birds. Okay, yay. So, and it's good examples there which people have mentioned in the word cloud, which is up and around drugs and stolen property, using property for sex work, storing weapons, taking over the property as a place for them to live, and again, taking over the property to financially abuse the tenant. And from a Safeguarding Adults point of view, we know that there are people who have been exploited in this way, are very vulnerable to exploitation, think that they're getting some new friends, and the friends turn out to be, you know, bad friends. And we know nationally there have been cases where it's had tragic consequences. I think it's also fair to say that sometimes the people that are doing the cuckooing are also very vulnerable themselves, and that we see perhaps young people who are involved in this type of behaviour, maybe involved in the county lines behaviour, and have issues of their own. So it's really important that when we suspect cuckooing and there are children and young people involved, that we liaise with between adults and children's services. So that's a reminder about cuckooing. The next thing I want to touch on is multi-agency meetings. And it's interesting, just in this this morning's session, we have heard about one multi-agency meeting, which is the channel panel. I've just mentioned a multi-agency meeting to look at cuckooing. So people attend an awful lot of multi-agency meetings. And one of the things that again has come out of reviews and audits is about people's understanding around multi-agency meetings. What is the purpose of the multi-agency meeting? What are we in the right multi-agency meeting? Is this the right multi-agency meeting to be attending? And I think that's you know, it's really important that as practitioners and as managers, we're really clear about what the meetings are about, why they're being held, and what the expectations are of people coming to the meeting, organising the meeting, or coming to the meeting. So my next slide, again, we have a guide in the Safeguarding Adults procedures as a guide to multi-agency meetings, and this is when responding to risk and harm to adults. So the meetings that we're talking about, both in the children's sector and the adult sector, are those meetings where we are meeting to discuss risk, harm and risk. And within the children's procedures, you will find that there are standards to be met in attendance at particular meetings, particularly those where, you know, the child protection meetings, strategy meetings, conference, etc. So, but all multi-agency meetings should include an agreed understanding of information sharing, so people know how and why we're sharing information. They should include a risk assessment, defensible decision making, and so on. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but I do think the important things are a clarity of purpose, making sure also that people know what to expect at a meeting, what to bring to a meeting, and that they don't leave a meeting without knowing what the next steps are. And, you know, the timescales, any contingencies. So it's really important. And I think this is particularly important where you have a situation where it's a complex issue, where there are multiple agencies involved, and from an adult perspective, where perhaps you've got fluctuating capacity of the person concerned and engagement. So it's making sure you're at the right meeting and you're prepared. So my other little poll here was to ask you to think about what are the best things about a multi-agency meeting. So if you could just perhaps think of the best things that come out of multi-agency meetings. Yeah, we've got sharing information, shared responsibility, better communication, collaboration. Yeah, collaboration and support, absolutely. I think that's particularly where you have situations that are quite volatile, the dynamics and fluctuating, and sometimes, you know, we're getting somewhere, sometimes we're not, but it is really important. I would also say, and I should have said this right at the start, and it links to Griff's point about making safeguarding personal. Wherever possible, we should have if not the person concerned present, their views are expressed, so we know what you know, what the child, the young person, or the adult wants to happen, what their best hopes would be, and sharing that.
This is Pratima, and I support the Children's Policy and Procedures Group for Safeguarding. And I agree with Helen and Liz that there isn't a guide like this, but the things that Helen has put up and talked about apply to all children's multi-agency meetings that safeguard children.
There is guidance in both the children's and the adults' procedures about domestic abuse. But we wanted to point out that domestic abuse now is between individuals is age 16 and over. So, you know, a lot of the time we talk about children, you know, child protection, adult protection, over 18. But it's a reminder that children from the age of 16 can be designated as victims of and involved in domestic abuse. And it's a message really to both adult and children's sector workers to remember that if domestic abuse is occurring, then we need to name it. We need to say that this is a domestic abuse type situation. And if you look at the domestic abuse guidance for both children and adults, it does go into a lot of detail about what we mean by domestic abuse and the different types of activity that can go on, the signs, the indicators, and particularly those dynamics in relationships where coercive and controlling behaviour is present. You know, and also that domestic abuse happens to older people. It isn't about young couples. It is older people experience domestic abuse and coercive and controlling behaviour, and we have seen that in reviews that we've undertaken, whether it be safeguarding adult reviews or domestic homicide reviews. It is there, that coercion and the control, and I'm sure colleagues within the children's sector will also see that in relationships between young people. There is coercion and there is control, and we need to name it, and we need to say this is the dynamic, and it should be recorded in case notes and in assessments, and where possible, if the system allows, then, you know, your categories of abuse, then, you know, name it, it is domestic abuse. But just to make sure that it's there, it's in the notes and described as it is. Okay. Escalation of concerns, again, a reminder that there are times when we are working closely with each other, collaborative way, but sometimes, you know, things don't work as well. Communication does break down between agencies. Perhaps there's concern that people are not being taken seriously, or they haven't, or there's disagreement about the levels of risk. And if that is the situation, then please, you know, follow the procedures, print off the flowchart so you know where to go and what to do if disagreements are there. As it says, at no time must professional dissent detract from ensuring that a child is safeguarded, and I would also say an adult is safeguarded. Their welfare must be paramount throughout. And as it said, disagreements can arise in a number of areas of multi-agency working, and it might be that, you know, and we hear it, you know, this, someone will say, well, I'm sure this is safeguarding, I'm sure it is, and you're saying it isn't, you know, and that's discussion about thresholds. Make sure that you have have looked at the thresholds documents on the procedures website for both children and adults. Disagreements about outcomes of assessments, decision making, roles and responsibilities, who's doing what, oh, I thought they were doing this, that's not my responsibility, etc., etc. Concerns about service provision, look, you know, we've identified a need, there isn't, you know, we don't have a service, its service is stretched. issues around information sharing and communication. What can we share? What can't we share? You know, it's so important that we understand that. So again, reminding yourselves of what the escalation procedures are saying. And if you're a visual person, very much like I'm a very visual person, and you know, I love a flow chart. So print off a flow chart and save it on your desktop, pin it on the wall, pin it on your, you know, wherever, pin it somewhere so you can see it.
Hi everyone, so I'm Suzi Armitage. I have the rather delightful title of Designated Doctor for Child Death for Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, and I work alongside the Child Death Overview panel. Our remit is to review the death of every child up to the age of 18 years who is or has been resident in Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, to try and understand why they died, what we can learn from it to prevent future child deaths. And there is a significant amount of learning that comes out of our Child Death Overview panel reviews, but also from safeguarding reviews around safer sleeping for babies. So when we look at our data for Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, looking over 5 years, we have an average of sadly 3 babies a year who die suddenly and unexpectedly, and we're unable to find an explanation as to why they died. But in 2 out of those 3 cases, on average, the baby will have been sleeping in what we know to be an unsafe sleep environment. So it's a recommendation that's come out of our annual report, as well as some of the learning from case reviews that are ongoing, to look at how we can tackle this. We know that the rate of SIDS, of unexplained infant deaths, particularly during sleep, has come down markedly in the last 30 years. But in those babies from more vulnerable homes, in those babies from more deprived backgrounds as well, the rates have not come down as much. So we wanted to put together a tool to help practitioners working with families, and this is something we're putting together. So this is a bit of a trailer, really. This is going to be ready to launch hopefully in September time. So watch this space. We will be back to present more about it. But we're developing a tool for any practitioner working with a family where there is a young baby to use, to help support them to have conversations with families, to give families information, help families to plan ahead and to make choices, to pick up on any particular vulnerabilities there are for that family and help support those, to try and help families have a safer sleeping environment for their babies. So yes, like I say, it's coming. We've got involvement from lots of different agencies in developing this. We've also already had some feedback and input from parents as well. So yes, we'll be back later on this year, hopefully, to present this in full.
Thank you.